Well, my friends, I hate to have to do this to you again. I really do. I wish that things were different than they are. But unfortunately, what we talked about at the start of this week, as far as the virus is concerned, the pandemic, it seems to be coming true. And we're going to go through the data. And again, I want this to be over as much as everyone. And I have, like many of us, started to go back to just a more normal pre pandemic way of living and all of it. I'm with everybody on this stuff. But we have to talk about things as they are and not as we wish that they would be. And earlier this week, I told you we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in some European countries, in some Asian countries. And in all likelihood, at some point, this is going to come here to the United States. And then we're going to have to figure out how bad is this going to get and how deadly is this going to be. And all of the questions we've all been exhaustingly grappling with now for 2 years plus a week. We're basically 2 years plus a week. I guess you'd call it 105 weeks into this pandemic in some way, shape, or form. And there are some very ugly numbers from yesterday. We'll put these up on the screen for people who are watching today. In South Korea, going all the way back to the start of the pandemic, more cases than ever in one day yesterday. Not in 2020, not in 2021. The worst day for new cases in South Korea was yesterday with about 400,000 new cases. That is an ugly chart. Imagine a really steep mountain, so steep that you'd fall off of it if you tried to climb it. That's what the cases look like in South Korea if you're listening today. In Germany, a very big spike to the point where Germany now, on an average, 7-day average, is at the highest point of the pandemic, now averaging about 210,000 cases a day. South Korea and Germany, very different countries, but we are seeing the same thing happen. In Vietnam, just an unbelievable spike, now regularly logging 175,000 new COVID cases per day. Ugly, ugly, ugly. It makes the first year and a half of the pandemic look like there were no cases in Vietnam because of how high the numbers are now. France, although France had a disastrous Omicron wave, so the numbers are nowhere near that yet. But other than the Omicron spike, France is also experiencing average daily cases now higher than the first, second, and third spikes. In the UK, which has been a big leading indicator, I don't know that there's any country that has better predicted what happens in the US than the UK throughout the pandemic. The UK's daily case numbers are now back up to about 60, 70,000 cases per day. And there's a question as to whether that's as high as it's going to go or whether it's going to continue climbing. Italy, which, remember, at the very beginning, Italy had one of the worst spikes. That spike, when we now look back, looks like nothing. It looks almost completely flat in April of 2020. And that was outdone in November of 2020. And of course, overwhelmingly outdone by the Omicron spike. Italy is now higher than at any point other than the Omicron spike. These are really, really ugly numbers. Now, let's kind of talk through what's the most disastrous interpretation. Well, some of that we're seeing in a number of different articles. One such article in Stat News: with infections spiking in Europe and a variant on the rise, experts warn the U.S. could face a COVID resurgence. And of course, we don't know how bad it could get. We're still seeing 1,000 people a day die. So could that get back up to 2,000, 3,000? It's a question mark. And obviously the hope is no. The hope would be no. Now, some of you might be saying, wait, and I haven't heard of a new variant. This is kind of a subvariant of Omicron. Omicron was called the BA1 variant. We're now seeing BA2. It's not its own unique variant in a sense. It's part of the same Omicron lineage. And it, from what we know right now, and I always want to be careful, from what we know as of right now, it is equivalent to Omicron in terms of severity, but it seems to be more contagious. So it's not its own variant, but it is a version of Omicron. So that's a pessimistic or more alarmist reaction. NBC News reporting on what the WHO now says. WHO says global rise in COVID cases is only the tip of the iceberg. After more than a month of decline, global COVID cases rose last week with the biggest jump in the Western Pacific region, which includes South Korea and China. And of course, the question is if and when this is coming to the United States. Now, I will now give you the more optimistic interpretation, which is the one I'm hoping for. And that would be, we've seen some other countries get through the BA2 variant already. They had their Omicron spike, and they had their, it's sometimes called stealth Omicron or BA2 spike. And it was a spike, but it was relatively short, and it again declined quickly. That would be the hope for the United States. The reason we might be less optimistic in the United States is we only have, I don't remember now if it's 26 or 28% of the population who has had 3 doses. And as we learned during the Omicron spike, that third dose, very, very effective at mitigating the impact of Omicron. We've learned that the 2 doses are not great when it comes to Omicron. We've also learned that a 4th dose, based on the data from the first Omicron spike, the 4th dose didn't really seem to do much to help with Omicron. So 3, it's this bowl of porridge is too cold, this bowl of porridge is too hot, whatever. So the hope would be that as more people get that 3rd dose, that we would end up with a BA2 spike that is not that bad. Analysis from the UK Health Security Agency shows the BA2 subvariant of Omicron is about 80% more contagious than BA1, and BA1 is the original Omicron variant. Cases and hospitalizations are rising in the UK and in a number of other countries. So we've said before, we might get to a point where cases don't really matter if hospitalizations don't go up as well. Unfortunately, in some of these European countries, we're seeing not only cases rise, but also hospitalizations. So we will continue following it and obviously hoping for the best. One of our sponsors today is Blue Chew, a unique online service delivering the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis in a chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. And they're giving my audience an entire month's supply for free. So if you think you could benefit from an extra boost of confidence when it's time, all you have to do is take a short quiz on their website. A licensed doctor approves your prescription. The medication comes straight to your home within days in a discreet package. No driving around to the doctor's office or the pharmacy. No waiting around. No awkward conversations with your doctor. All of Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA. The entire process is just a few clicks. Go to bluechew.com. The link is underneath this video. They'll give you an entire month's supply for free when you use the promo code PACMAN. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping.